We are still continuing with our discussions in terms of the mental state of mind, mens rea, and various aspects of it, which we have discussed in terms of intention, knowledge, mens rea as such. I had also, during the course of the discourses which were earlier rendered, dwelt in great detail as far as mens rea is concerned. I had also spoken about the presence of mens rea in the penal code. I had also spoken of exceptions where certain offences mens rea is not there and how it is to be dealt with. Now, coming to a separate section here, there are certain states of mind within the penal code which have been defined. Those I had expressed yesterday. For instance, dishonestly, fraudulently. These kind of states of mind have been defined separately by sections in the penal code. Going a little further from there are certain states of mind which do not find a definition, though they find a mention within the provision to complete the offence as such, but there is no definite definition provided within the penal code. Now, giving instances of those, there are 6 instances which you can generally see, and those instances are in relation to the states of mind which depict corruptly, malignantly, maliciously, wantonly, rashly, and negligently. By and large, this will cover, in some combinations you will find rashly and negligently being used together. In some combinations, corruptly and malignantly being used together. For instance, corruptly you will find specifically in relation to provisions which relate to 200, 219 and 220, 196 and 198. 219 and 220 finding it's a special class wherein corruptly and malignantly are used alternatively together, defining the offence. Now, since the word corruptly has not been defined, and neither have all those other states of mind which I had described being defined in the penal code, how is it that it is to be construed? Is the next question. The construction would be the meaning that it is given to the said word by an ordinary dictionary, a standard dictionary. To begin with, that is the meaning which will be attributed. Collins, Webster's, Oxford, standard dictionaries. Now, if we look into the meaning of the word corrupt out there, how is corruptly written in the said dictionaries, for instance? All those, they relate to each of those dictionaries. At various places you will find that these are the synonymous words which you find by which it is defined. That it is considered to be an act without integrity, contrary to purity, something which is impure, or something which is viciously, or wickedly. Generally, this word corruptly has got a thing to do with the moral character of a person. So, therefore, anything which is morally unsound or debased as an act, is attributed to this word corruptly. And this attribution you will find in a case which I had discussed earlier, when we talked about the concepts of fraudulently and dishonestly, and where the word fraudulently was described in great detail. That was S. Dutt. S. Dutt versus Union of India, S. Dutt versus State of UP. The citation was AIR 1966, Supreme Court 563. So, while discussing the aspect of a fraudulent act in S. Dutt, the court, came to the conclusion that there was no fraud which was committed. If you people remember, Estak's facts were this, that he had claimed himself to be an expert, and when the court asked for his qualifications, he had produced a certificate, and that certificate was found to be forged. He claimed himself to be qualified from an institute from London, and when the prosecution challenged that claim, the court asked for the document. He produced the document, and on his production of the document, the court came to the conclusion that the document was not, that it was a forgery. But the court said that since the act was not fraudulent, and the reason which the court attributed was in relation to the definition of forgery, if you people recollect, the court said that, look, one, he did not produce it on his own, and secondly, he did not try to derive any advantage out of it. It was called for by the court, and he produced it. But the court said that, look, what he has done is not a fraudulent act, but it is an act which is corrupt in nature. He had tried to essentially mislead the court and mislead the opposition in terms of his qualification. And that act in itself was debased and corrupt. So that is where the court says that it was a morally corrupt and debased act, and the offence which will be attracted will be an offence under 199. So that is how the court considered the word corrupt to be somewhat different, because corrupt again is not defined. So going a little further from here, so when the court interprets this, there as well, when the interpretation took place, if I remember correctly, the court referred to the dictionary. But invariably, when this word corrupt is used in any statute, it essentially gives a flavor of a wrongdoing, a wrong design by somebody. And the idea is a motivation of doing this act in order to cause an advantage, pecuniary or otherwise, to oneself or to somebody else. So that is the ambit in which this word corruptly operates. Now, interestingly, when we look into 219 and 220, the provisions, this provision uses this word corruptly or malignantly, maliciously, in an alternative form. If you see, take up 219 and 220, you will find that these words are being used alternatively. For a minute, if you people can revert to section 219 of the Indian Penal Code, you will find that these two words are being used alternatively. Now, when it is being used alternatively, it means that these have two different meanings. They do not mean the same thing. Maybe one takes a little bit of color from the other. Now, 219. Let us come to 219 for a minute, or 220 for that matter. In both these sections, you will find 219 says, public servant in judicial proceeding, corruptly making report, etc., contrary to law. Whoever being a public servant, corruptly or maliciously makes. So you find that it is alternatively used. Similarly, 220 for a minute. Commitment for trial or confinement by persons having authority who knows that he is acting contrary to law. Whoever being in any office which gives him legal authority to commit persons for trial or confinement, or to keep persons in confinement, corruptly or maliciously commits any person for trial. So when this word maliciously is being used out here, again in common parlance what it means is one way of looking at it. That is the dictionary meaning. And the other way is that legally speaking, how is it that the courts have considered the meaning of this word? There are two aspects to it. Courts also derive color from the common meaning or the common usage which you find in the way a dictionary looks at it. Now, maliciously, for instance, out here, in common parlance means ill will against somebody. You are nursing an ill will. So, you don't like the person, you are nursing an ill will against him. So, you have the tendency that is urging, that is creating a state of mind for you to act in a particular fashion. Now, when you talk about it, this is the common parlance view, and this is what the courts have derived upon from the dictionaries. But when they look upon it on a legal point of view, they say that it is essentially a wrongful act, an act which is wrongful, which is being done intentionally and without any just cause or excuse. So there is no just cause or excuse. It is a wrongful act which is being done intentionally. Now, this question of malice on various occasions, now these are issues which can be judged only by way of a trial. It's a question of fact. Whether there was malice or not has to be seen from the circumstances, which is a question of fact, which means that evidence will be laid. So therefore, looking at it from the point of view of a trial, for instance, invariably these sections which talk about malice, now this will become a question of fact. Now when it becomes a question of fact and it becomes a question of evidence, it will be difficult for you in those kind of circumstances to effect a discharge. Until and unless the circumstances are so grave or of such a nature from which the court can gather, which invariably it will not, because the prosecution will produce a case and say that you acted by malice. But those circumstances they will have to show. So if that be the scenario, then in that situation it becomes a fact scenario of a trial. This I will deal with these portions when we deal with the offence of defamation, for instance. Defamation, again, though of late some courts have essentially discharged on the grounds of the fact that the offence is not getting, the ingredients of the offence are not being made out in relation to defamation issues, but invariably you will find that the defences which you raise in question of a defamation offence are generally questions of fact which need to be established in a court of law. We will come to that later, that is a separate issue in altogether. But I am just trying to give an example or trying to correlate two things. So therefore, malice also is something which militates against bona fide. So there is mala fide in the said act. It is actuated out of malice. It is actuated out of ill will. So therefore, the act will not have bona fides. So there is another element to it, that whatever act it is, there will be no lawful excuse for the same. It will be without lawful excuse. And coupled with the fact that there will be a knowledge that there will be some kind of an injury which will be caused to person or property. That knowledge is there. When the act is being committed, one, there will be no particular lawful excuse for doing the same. And at the same time, at the back of your mind, there will be a knowledge of the fact that it will cause some kind of injury. Now, this knowledge aspect will become a little relevant, because that is why I discussed knowledge and intention and mens rea at that point of time. Now, these aspects will become relevant when we talk in terms of rash and negligent act as well. Now then, talking in these terms, let us then from there move on to a scenario of two provisions where, by way of an illustration, I will be in a position to exhibit things better. One is section 295A IPC, and this is a little contemporary and relevant because these are provisions which are now being used or misused, if I may say so. 295A and 153A. These are two provisions which I will like to visit and then illustrate by way of an example. 295A, all of you have got 295A? This says, Deliberate and malicious acts. Now I am on the aspect of malice alone. I have moved away from the corrupt part. The corrupt aspect I dealt with. I am on the malicious part right now. Deliberate and malicious acts intended to outrage religious feelings of any class by insulting its religion or religious beliefs. Now you people must have realized why I am saying it is very contemporary. Whoever with deliberate and malicious intention, note the word intention, malicious intention, which is talking about a state of mind. So there has to be ill will somewhere when you talk about malicious intention. Malicious intention or religious belief. Whoever with deliberate and malicious intention of outraging the religious feelings of any class of citizens of India by words either spoken or written, or by signs or by visible representation or otherwise, insults or attempts to insult the religion or the religious belief of that class shall be punishable with the imprisonment of so and so. Now let us read 153A for a minute. 153A has a shade, but the shade is somewhat different. As they say, shades of grey, dark shade and lighter shade of grey. So here you have a lighter shade, 153A. One is a darker shade, the other is a lighter shade. Now let us come to 153A. 153A says, promoting enmity between different groups on grounds of religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, etc., and doing acts prejudicial to the maintenance of harmony. So there are shades, but the shade is different out here because it says, whoever by words either spoken, written, or by signs, visible representations, otherwise promotes, attempts to promote, ground of religion, race, place of birth, residence, so and so, disharmony, feeling of ill will, enmity between different religions, languages, castes, commits any act which is prejudicial to the maintenance of harmony, so and so, organizes an exercise, right? This goes on. Organizes any exercise, movement, drill, all that becomes quite comprehensive. C. Shall be punished with an imprisonment which may extend to so and so. So, what is the essential difference? Here, there is no mental state of mind. There is no mens rea involved in this section. Did you notice? In 153A, when you take in terms of 295, 295 talks about intention. 153A, by the mere publication of anything of this kind, it will bring it within the ambit of this section. Okay? So, this is one essential difference which I wanted you people to have a look. But now there is a very interesting case which happened, and I am moving to that case when I am dealing with this aspect of maliciousness. Though certain amount of mens rea is attributed, even if it is not mentioned, if you remember what I had stated in the beginning. So here, the imputation of mens rea will happen as far as this section is concerned. When I had discussed earlier, there will be certain provisions where there will be no mens rea. But there will be imputation of mens rea, even if it is not there, the court will consider as if there is mens rea. Unless the statute specifically says that it will not be there. I had dealt with those portions in previous lecture. I am not intending to repeat, but I am just again refurbishing to you people. I showed you the difference, and then I will show to you how courts apply it. Now come to the next part. Now a very interesting case that I wanted to. How many of you have heard of Safdar Hashmi? I don't know how many of you have heard, though, because right now all of you are muted. Anyway, Safdar Hashmi was a very interesting man. He essentially used to take to social issues and do street plays in relation to that. And during the course of the staging of one of those street plays, an incident happened in Ghaziabad and he got murdered. But that is besides the point. This case is not in relation to that. Post Safdar Hashmi's death, Safdar Hashmi Memorial Trust was established, and it took to promotion of activities which essentially fought against bigotry, fought against communalism, and took up issues of those nature. Interestingly, they were also involved in various cultural activities. Every year on 1st or 2nd of January, they have an annual musical concert which takes place at Mandi House. Those of you who are interested can go and see it at some point of time. Now, what happened? The Safdar Hashmi Memorial Trust, since it also promoted amity between various communities, it did a lot of work in relation to various aspects of religion as well. And during the course of one of these exercises, in the year 2001, they decided to come out with an exhibition, wherein in that exhibition they intended to portray the depiction of the Ramayana in other religions as well. I don't know how many of you are aware. I will expound a little bit on that because it will probably generate a little bit of interest as far as you people are concerned. For those of you who know or those of you who don't, Ramayana is an epic which is associated with the culture and ethos of this country to a great extent. Now, when you talk in terms of culture and ethos, this culture and ethos has seeped itself across religious sects, across religions, across castes, and even across regions, for the message that this epic gives. So therefore, this epic does not have one version to it. There are many ways of looking at it. For instance, you have the Valmiki Ramayana, which was considered to be the earliest, which is normally prevalent in the north. In the south, we have what is called the Kamba Ramayana. Kamban wrote a Ramayana some 800 years ago, which has become very popular in south. Similarly, various places wherever the Ramayana travelled, because it travelled more not by writing. An epic essentially is a poem. It is in a verse form, or it is in the form of a story, If it is in prose, it is in the form of a story, so it is being told from one person to the other. The manner in which I am, indulging in a kind of storytelling here. The Ramayana used to be interpreted and spoken and enacted, and generally it spread in this form. And it spread not only in India, it spread outside this country also. By the land route, they say, it went via Punjab, and via Punjab it went across to the northern sides, and it went to regions much ahead. Similarly, by the southern route, via Gujarat, by the sea route, it is supposed to have gone via Tamil Nadu and across to Java, Sumatra and places like that. And again by the land route, from the east, it has gone to Thailand, Cambodia and those countries. It is enacted there also. Now, the various religions which India had seen over a period of time, Jainism, for instance, has their own version of the Ramayana. It's a very interesting version, because they don't agree to all that the Hindus say about the Ramayana. And in fact, the tale digresses there, wherein they say that as far as Rama was concerned, Rama was essentially a kind of a Jain ascetic of a very high order. And of course, the basic structure of the story is that, of course, Ravana and Rama and the abduction of Sita is there and all that is there. But interestingly, when the fight takes place, in the Jain rendering of the Ramayana, it is Lakshman who kills Ravan there. It is not Rama who kills Ravana there. So there are these kind of differences which happen in relation to the tale. And they say that Rama was an ideal man who attained Kaivalya, which means that he attained moksha post all this. Because the Jain philosophy talks about moksha. So he attained moksha. And they say that over generations, Lakshmana and Ravana had a kind of a relationship that they would be born over generations and fight each other. And interestingly, in the Jain rendering, Lakshmana was sent to hell. He did not go to heaven, he went to hell along with Ravan. So you see how the tale changes. In Thailand, for instance, there are kings who have been named after Rama. Rama 1, Rama 2, Rama 3, that is the way they have been named. And they have cities named after Ayodhya. Kishkinda. So this is how the tale changes over a period of time. So now, coming back to the case. So this matter was that this kind of difference which was there in various kinds of Ramayanas and various depictions of Ramayanas in various religions and various milieux, they decided to organize a function and they created posters, and those posters they put up all over the city. And the idea in those posters was that the Ram Katha being depicted in Buddhist and Jain versions, Jain traditions. And this was under the aegis of the trust, the Sehmat Trust. Now when these posters came up, somebody registered a case with the state saying this, that our religious sentiments have got hurt. One, how is it that Buddhism and Jainism is arrogating our Rama? Rama belongs to us, Hindus. So our religious feelings are hurt. And these posters, they all should be removed and they should be confiscated. Now to do that, the provision that exists in the penal code, not in the code of criminal procedure, you people will have a look, are provisions of 95 and 96. So as per 95, a notification is to be issued by the state government, which has to say that this particular poster which has been issued is creating a scenario of this kind, which is bringing it within the ambit of these offences. So that notification was issued. And under 96, there is a window that within a period of this window, you are in a position to challenge the said notification if you find that the notification is baseless. So that challenge is what this case dealt with. And during the course of the said challenge, because these sections were invoked, the court came with the conclusion that here the intention aspect, which I talked about in relation to maliciously, that ill will, the element of ill will was not there. Number one. Number two, the court also quashed this for the reason that the notification was vague. Because the notification was generalized, it simply said that a large section of the community was likely to be incensed by these posters. Now they did not even, the notification did not even define which community would be incensed and in what way it would be incensed. So therefore, the mens rea element was lacking. There was no malicious act, there was no ill will. In fact, it was a situation where comedy was being promoted, not ill will. So therefore, I thought of putting up this case as a test case to explain these concepts to you. Now, having talked about maliciously, we will move on to the next state of mind, and that is wantonly. And we will discuss how this state of mind, though again not defined, how it is looked at by way of a dictionary meaning, and how it is looked at from a legal sense. How wantonly then will be a little different from rashly, because next would come thereafter, the next subset, that will be rashly. And then we will move on from there on to negligently. So these we will deal with as and when we get an extension of time out here. Thank you.